This year, we held a 2-month-long competition to find the world's deadliest carnivorous plant between fast and accurate Venus flytraps, sticky sundews that curl around their prey, and pitcher plants that catch and eat thousands of flies at once. 5 carnivorous plants go head-to-head in ways no one has ever seen before. These are my craziest flytrap videos of the year, all in one movie. When a fly lands on a Venus flytrap, it only takes 1/10 of a second for the trap to snap shut. And even though this makes it a deadly predator, there are other carnivorous plants that can catch hundreds or even thousands. So what happens if we take the 5 deadliest carnivorous plants and give each of them exactly 1 hour outside to catch as many flies as they can? Well, let's find out in the 1 hour hustle. The first event of the Flytrap games, where we're searching for the deadliest carnivorous plant. And Patrick here, the dewy pine, might actually have the best tactic. He doesn't even need to move. Flies just need to touch him, and once they do, they get wrapped up in glue that slowly suffocates them. Now obviously, each of these plants are very different and catch different types of bugs. So to make this as fair as possible, the plants just need to catch as much as possible. They don't need to hold on to it. The strength event will come up in a few more weeks. However, Patrick the dewy pine has some of the slimiest dew out of all carnivorous plants. As this fly tries to get free, he rubs his legs together, which only spread that slime all over his body. And sometimes it's even enough to get their wings stuck together, which means that they'll never be able to fly away. Now Patrick has actually surprised me with his 3 catches, because I didn't think he caught anything until I started editing, as there were no flies stuck on him, which is why today's catch and release rule is so important, especially when we see what the hungriest carnivorous plant can do. But before we see that, we have the world's biggest sundew, the king sundew. His leaves can get up to 28 inches long and often feeds on huge bugs like moths, butterflies, and even dragonflies. And although he also uses sticky droplets like Patrick to catch food, the king has a trick up his sleeve. He can move his leaves to strangle his prey. And because of this, he might be able to catch more food than Patrick ever could.
Look at that.
And that might just be true. After only 40 seconds into his 1 hour time limit, the king has already caught his first fly. However, this guy figures out how to escape thanks to his friend. You see, this guy also gets caught, but uses his wings to pull himself free. And after he sees this, he ends up copying him and also manages to escape. But just as soon as that one gets free, the king catches another fly that's basically double the size of those other 2. And he doesn't stop there. Over and over again. If these flies were the king's main food source, like moths and butterflies, we wouldn't be able to see his leaves after all 10 of these catches. Now, although the king sundew isn't the most deadly plant today, up next, we have the most deadly looking carnivorous plant. Darling, the cobra lily. Darling's tongue, dripping with sweet but deadly nectar, sticks out of her trap just like a spitting cobra. But instead of going after her food, the food comes to her. And after they get a taste of that nectar, they walk up into her mouth and eventually fall down her throat, where her victims then get digested by her acids. However, Darling was kind of slacking a bit because it took her half an hour to attract her first fly. And to just make sure we're all on the same page here, because of how sticky plants work, when a bug lands on them, they get caught immediately, even if it manages to escape later. But a bug can only get caught by the next few plants in today's event by actually getting caught inside their traps. So what this means for Darling is that she didn't even catch one bug today, even though she managed to attract 7 of them in total. It's okay though, because the next few weeks will give her tons of chances to move up on the leaderboard. But it's time we look at the 2 favorites for today's event, our Venus flytrap and our pitcher plants. They are both perfectly adapted to catching flies, so if we are going to see a feast today, it's going to be now. Venus flytraps catch 1 bug per trap, so if B52 here fills up with flies, we will swap him out with another flytrap. In fact, all the plants in the series can swap out with another plant as long as they are the same. Flytraps with flytraps, king sundews with king sundews, you understand what I mean. This is to make sure we always have competitors ready to go. Imagine if B52 catches a fly in every trap today, he wouldn't have finished digesting his meal for next week's event. And as you can tell, this is very necessary because the flies are basically swarming the flytrap before I can even get the camera set up. And it was just a matter of seconds before B52 starts taking his chances. But just like in Season 1, it's obvious that B52 needs more than just size to do well. He is letting the flytraps down by missing basically everything that comes his way, and has only caught 1 fly after 4 misses. However, this catch might be his turning point. As you can see, I'm still getting everything set up while all of this is going on, which is when I noticed these 2 using the trap the way it is meant to be used, by licking it. Flytraps secrete tasty nectar around the edges of the trap, which is one tactic they use to attract food. And for B52, this is the only tactic that seems to be working for him because he isn't that quick and his size doesn't help him that much. Now, as bugs lick that nectar, they slowly move around the trap, which is actually what we want because that's how bugs get tricked into hitting the trigger hairs. However, because B52 is so big, not all bugs are long enough to actually reach those trigger hairs. But if your nectar is tasty enough that you have more than 1 bug eating it at once, well, you might just be able to catch something. After only getting his 2nd catch, B52 seems to have just forgotten about his let them get addicted to nectar before closing strategy. And with all of his traps now closed, it's time to bring out our replacement, Black Pearl. And she starts taking names before I even finish setting up the camera. Within just 10 minutes, Black Pearl has pulled the flytraps up from 2 catches to 6, which means they should be in 2nd place when we update the leaderboard in a couple of minutes. But until we do that, it's time to see what the hungriest carnivorous plant in the world can do, the pitcher plant. Now, I'm not calling them the hungriest carnivorous plants for no reason. Pitcher plants are laced in an addictive and toxic nectar that gets almost any insect instantly hooked before poisoning them with something called carnine. And their long, bright and colorful pitchers are able to hold thousands of insects at a time, especially when they're too drunk to move properly. So let's find out what our pitcher plants, the most nectar covered carnivorous plants of them all, can do to the flies in our garden. Yet, funnily enough, Sarah here has so much nectar all over her pitchers that the flies don't even need to go into her traps to get some more. Luckily for us though, we have a smaller pitcher plant that actually has less nectar that will be a perfect substitute for the remainder of their time. And this early substitution came in clutch for the pitcher plants. with only 12 minutes left, Ruby here needs just 2 more catches to tie the pitcher plants with the king sundews at the top of the leaderboard. And with the way he is going right now, he could easily do it. And somehow, Ruby here managed to tie his team up with the king sundews by filling up his trap as much as he possibly could. He definitely would have eaten more if he wasn't so full. But while we take a quick look at the leaderboard after our first event, that is just the first episode of the Flytrap games. The next ones only get crazier and crazier with some amazing prizes for our winner. If you've ever held a giant beetle, you'd know how strong they are. But are they strong enough to escape a Venus flytrap? Would it use its powerful legs to climb free, or are Venus flytraps strong enough to hold them back? Well, today we're testing 3 of the world's strongest bugs against the 5 most dangerous carnivorous plants in the grip game. The second event of the Flytrap games, where we're searching for the deadliest carnivorous plant. Our first bug is a fully grown locust. Their powerful back legs are stronger than iron, which they use to launch themselves away from predators and into the air, where they then fly up to 90 miles per day. But could these strong legs help it escape from one of the stickiest and slimiest carnivorous plants in the world, Patrick, the dewy pine? Last week, Patrick here only caught 3 flies and didn't even hold on to them, which is honestly pretty bad for a dewy pine. They genuinely do have some of the stickiest dew out of all carnivorous plants, but today he could earn a massive 5 points per bug if he is able to hold on to them for longer than anyone else. Yet, as it turns out, Patrick's sticky leaves are no match for the powerful legs of a locust. However, that doesn't mean we don't have something that could hold back locusts and even stronger bugs later on. But until then, we have a different sticky plant, and this one does something special that could help it catch bugs. You see, the king sundew is the biggest sundew in the world, and if you didn't know it, not only are these long leaves covered in extremely sticky dew, but if they catch a bug, it starts to curl around it and then suffocates it while digesting it alive, just like an octopus does when it catches its prey. Yet, that's only if the bug sits still for long enough. And the thing about locusts is that they're always ready to jump away. Now, although these sticky plants haven't done too well with this locust, that doesn't mean they won't have their chance later on when we get to some of the calmer bugs. But until then, we finally have a plant that might actually catch this locust, Darling, the cobra lily. Now, just so we're on the same page here, I'm making sure these bugs are properly caught by the traps, as this is a strength test. Once they're caught, the bugs can then use whatever special tactics they have to escape, which we will see more of after the cobra lily. Now, this is because today's event is not an attraction test. That will come in the next few weeks, so make sure to subscribe for that one. However, the thing about a locust this big is that it can't really fit inside of Darling's tube here, which means it's constantly half caught. And although the locust did stay here for the full 30 minutes, I'm not sure how to count this one when we update the leaderboard. So let me know what you guys think. For now, I'll count it as a catch, but we have some much more exciting catches with the locust coming up, especially when we see some of the tactics it can use to escape. You see, locusts are banned for one major reason. They love eating plants. Not only have they destroyed our Venus flytraps in the past, but they could easily do it to our pitcher plants too, especially because they always get chewed up by wasps. So, if the locust's powerful legs aren't strong enough to help it escape from our next 2 plants, their powerful jaws might be their best way out. That is, if the plant lets them survive for long enough to even try it. But as it turns out, This specific pitcher plant is tough enough to handle this locust. You see, all pitcher plants have waxy walls that make it extremely slippery and difficult for bugs to get a good grip. Perfect for catching bugs, but not so perfect if you are a giant locust that needs some space to jump out or to use its jaws to escape. And as it turns out, this slippery wall works so well that the locust only slides further down the pitcher, closer towards those stomach acids. Now, even though we finally have our first completely successful locust catch, the locust's final battle of the day has got to be one of my favorites. As we saw earlier, and in some of my other videos, the locusts always manage to escape or eat the flytraps. However, that's because they had an advantage. The flytraps we used were always big, but none of them were as big or powerful as DCXL is today, with its biggest and strongest possible summer growth. He completely clamps down on the locust and doesn't give it even a millimeter to get its powerful legs or jaws into a better position. It's literally grabbed perfectly by the flytrap, and for the first time on our channel, the locust has no chance against the flytraps. However, this is probably the easiest bug any of these plants will face today, because the moment our second bug came up, things started to fall apart. We all know that cockroaches are basically invincible. Almost nothing can kill them. But seeing as these plants are perfectly adapted to catching bugs, a cockroach shouldn't be an issue, right? Well, nothing can actually stick on to their wings.
Bro, what? Did he even get stuck?
And it didn't only happen to Patrick the dewy pine.
No chance.
I didn't think it would be possible, but the king sundew is even worse than Patrick.
No chance. Nope. It doesn't even get any slam on its back. That's how well adapted the roaches are to being slippery. That is insane.
And its ability to survive doesn't stop here. After 7 minutes, this guy managed to turn himself around and then climb out of the pitcher, backwards. And seeing as there was nothing going on out there, he jumped back in so that he could clean his antenna. However, I didn't know that he knew how to escape. So when I came back to make sure he was awake, we both got a fright.
Whoa! No ways.
At this point, I wasn't sure if even DCXL could hold this guy back. In fact, I gave him 3 chances just like I gave the king sundew. And as it turns out, the same thing that made the roach so slippery and difficult to hold onto back then is the same problem that DCXL has now. However, I think Darling has the best tactic to hold back something as insane as this roach. Not only do cobra lilies have long tubes like Sarah does, but they also have these windows in their heads. Now these windows make it super bright inside of here, which confuses bugs by making them think the way out is up, just like almost any other insect trap. So even if the roach does manage to get up the tube, it would never know that the escape hole is right below it. Now seeing as only one plant was able to hold back the roach, I wasn't so sure how our competitors would do with a giant beetle, the strongest bug in today's event. But as it turns out, things were much closer than I expected. You see, even while the locust has strong legs and jaws, and while the roach has slippery wings, the beetle has all 3 of these and one simple trick that doctors hate. They are almost impossible to crush, which is why its battle with DCXL will be so interesting. However, even though the beetle can easily escape both sticky plants like the roach could, it still has the same issue with Darling. Even if it manages to climb up the tube, it won't know that it needs to go down to escape. And unlike the roach, the beetle can't actually use its strong legs with Sarah here, as they're so much shorter than the roaches were. However, Mr. Beetle's opportunity to show off his strength has finally arrived. As he walks into the trap, he touches the trigger hairs and surprisingly gets caught perfectly. Now, although he looks like he was about to immediately escape, he stopped fighting against DCXL and chose to hide for a little bit. But as we know, that's a really bad idea. As long as DCXL knows that there is something in his mouth, he will keep on squeezing tighter and tighter until he starts secreting his digestive acids. And although getting crushed like the locust isn't something Mr. Beetle needs to worry about, he could still get covered in acid if he doesn't act soon enough. And if you didn't know, that happens when flytraps completely seal their traps, like DCXL is doing right now. Yet, as if Mr. Beetle knows this, he starts moving. He manages to get his snout through the top of the trap to get a breath of fresh air, and this is when his battle to escape begins. He doesn't have anything to grab onto and pull himself free, but what he does have are incredibly strong legs that will work tirelessly to find even the tiniest amounts of grip on this slippery trap. And with his own slippery shell helping him out, he manages to squeeze his front paws out of the trap, where he now has enough grip to pull himself free. Watching bugs escape from a predator like DCXL is always incredible to see. After 2 events, our leaderboard is starting to take shape. But little did I know just how much it would change over the next few months. If a cricket licks a Venus flytrap, it ends up getting drunk and falls asleep inside the trap. And although it might not seem like it, this one still gets caught in a way that shouldn't be possible. But what would happen if we release 100 crickets into an arena with 1 flytrap and 4 other deadly carnivorous plants? Will each plant catch a few, or will the flytrap dominate and eat them all?
18 crickets, 19, 20...
Well, today we're going to find out in the Bug Royale, the 3rd event in the Flytrap games, where we're searching for the deadliest carnivorous plant. All we need for this event is a huge tub and a heavy bag of sand to fill it up. And after counting out all 100 crickets, it's time to dump them in and see what they'll do. But of course, our Venus flytrap DCXL immediately takes his chance.
I'm not ready to film this, it's only been 10 seconds.
However, DCXL isn't the only one that the crickets are interested in. While it might look like they're randomly running around, there are 2 things they always end up doing: climbing up tall grasses and sticks, or hiding in leaves and soil. And as it turns out, they love hiding in between all of Darling's traps here. Yet, little do they know that the tasty nectar on all the leaves around them will actually lead them inside the traps where they will never be able to escape from. Now, just to let you guys know, this event is only 1 hour long, and the plant that catches and attracts the most crickets gets the most points. Yet, seeing as the crickets absolutely love DCXL for some reason, his impossible catch might help him win today's event. However, between the addictive and deadly nectar of Sarah, the glue of the King Sundew, and the deadly hiding spots of Darling, DCXL has a lot of competition today. And honestly, Darling here might be his biggest rival. You see, while watching this cricket get confused about why it can't get out of Darling's trap, another one walks straight up her other pitcher, not knowing that its friend is stuck just inches away.
Oh, it's going in.
Cobra lilies have nectar that they secrete all over their pitchers and their tongues, which is how they get insects to walk into their traps. And when they get inside, these windows confuse them and make them think that the only way out is up, even though it is actually down. And they keep on walking around up here until they eventually fall down this tube into Darling's stomach. Now, while bending upside down to film this was quite difficult,
My back.
I'm kinda glad I had to do this, because if I hadn't, I would never have noticed that the King Sundew had actually caught something.
Oh, they're getting caught in the sundews. Can you guys see that?
I didn't think he would catch something because the crickets would need to get up to his traps somehow, which is why I added these grass sticks everywhere. But the crickets would then need to be dumb enough to walk onto these sticky droplets and get caught. However, seeing as these crickets were all eating these sticky droplets, they are dumb enough to find them pretty tasty and probably don't mind walking on them to get some more. Yet, this guy found out the hard way that they will eat you if you aren't careful. And talking about grass sticks everywhere, they seem to be helping Sarah too.
There's a cricket on Sarah.
Finding a cricket on Sarah is even more surprising because the crickets don't have much of a reason to climb up here. Most of Sarah's nectar is on the lid of her pitcher, all the way up here. However, pitcher plants do have some nectar on their traps that leads insects up towards their lids, where they eventually get drunk, caught, or in this case, poisoned. As the cricket starts getting more and more of that nectar that's literally dripping off of Sarah's lid, he doesn't realize that he is slowly eating something called carnine that's also inside that nectar. Now, we have seen this nectar get small bugs like flies addicted before, but we have never seen how quickly it can affect something bigger like this cricket. As he eats that nectar, it immediately starts affecting all the muscles in his body, slowly paralyzing him. Yet, because that nectar is so addictive, he just can't stop himself from eating it. That is, until his muscles literally stop working and he falls into the trap. I have never seen a catch this brutal before, but it might not be as insane as DCXL's catch coming up a little bit later that might help him win today's event. However, while filming Sarah catch her cricket, I noticed something just as strange as the king sundew's catch from earlier.
You can see the leaves are already starting to curl around them. Oh, we missed one. We missed one. Oh, we missed another one.
Yep, instead of missing just one catch while watching Sarah, I also missed this cricket getting caught by Patrick. This guy probably thought that the dew here was the same as the king sundew we saw earlier, but little did he know that it's even stickier. And he must have been here for a while because it doesn't seem like he can move anymore, and that's not because of the sticky dew. Insects don't have lungs like me and you. In fact, they're so small that it would be a waste of energy for them to have them. Instead, they rely on air just moving in and out of their body, and they let this happen with things called spiracles. They are literally holes in the sides of their bodies. But as you guys have probably guessed, there's a big issue with this that the sticky plants use to their advantage. If those spiracles get clogged up with slime, the bug suffocates, and that's exactly what has happened to this cricket here. However, this is also when I realized that DCXL was playing with his food and is doing so well today that he could move up to first spot on the leaderboard. You see, this cricket has been eating his nectar for ages now, but for some reason, this trap still hasn't closed. Now usually, this is because the trigger hairs just haven't been touched yet. If you didn't know, they need to be touched twice within 20 seconds of each other for the trap to close. But as you'll soon see, this isn't the reason. The only other reason that makes sense is that this trap is just old. But that doesn't really make sense either, as this trap is still healthy. I know it's healthy because I used this exact trap last week to catch a cockroach, and it is still making a lot of nectar. So much, in fact, that this cricket falls into a nectar coma for 10 minutes and only wakes up when another one walks in. Yet, even with two huge crickets in here, DCXL still doesn't close, and instead the cricket runs off in between the leaves. But for some reason, this cricket is now purposely looking for traps to sit inside. If you haven't noticed yet, all the crickets on this plant are extremely chilled out because the nectar does make them a little bit drunk. But this one purposely wants to chill out right in the middle of a trap, which is something I have never seen before. And if you watch closely, he wants to be inside the trap so badly that when it starts to close, instead of jumping out or backwards, he jumps deeper inside. And with some of the most interesting catches I have ever seen, the plant's head-to-head battle royale had hit its 1 hour limit, and it's now time to count up the winners. If anyone can guess why DCXL didn't catch that cricket sooner, let me know in the comments. And just to remind you, the winning plants will get a custom-made winner's pot that I have been designing for years now, a trophy with all previous and future series winners on it, and an all-you-can-eat buffet. Not only that, but 5 subscribers will get a cutting of the winning plant, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of this. We are now halfway through our tournament, and the next 2 events are where winners are made. The top 3 spots can easily change, and honestly, it is very close. When a bug lands on a carnivorous plant, it slowly curls its leaves around it so that it can't escape. But what happens when we use rotten chicken to attract thousands of flies and release 5 deadly carnivorous plants against them? Can any of the plants deal with this many flies, or will they get overrun and die? Well, today we'll find out in the bait and switch, the 4th event of the Flytrap games, where we're searching for the deadliest carnivorous plant. This chicken is 1 month out of date and has literally attracted thousands of flies and even a few wasps. And seeing as Patrick here is covered in hundreds of tiny bugs, he should be able to catch at least a few flies, right? Well, dewy pines like Patrick here are opportunistic. They catch bugs that fly past and get caught on these sticky droplets by mistake, or when they land on them thinking that they found some food or water. So this should be perfect for him. Now, just to let you guys know, each plant gets half an hour to catch as many bugs as possible.
Okay.
And the plant that catches the most wins the most points in today's event. And it doesn't take long for the flies to show up and Patrick to start catching them. However, he isn't very good at holding on to them, yet this actually seems to be on purpose. In the past few videos, I've told you that Patrick is the stickiest plant in this tournament, and while this is true, he just can't hold onto anything bigger than these tiny flies. Now, he should be able to catch things as big as dragonflies, but between him being quite young and the sun here not being as strong as it is in Spain, which would help him grow stronger, he doesn't seem to hold on to anything too big, which makes sense because why worry about bugs that are too big to hold on to? Might as well focus on what you know you can eat. However, this won't affect his points, as today's event is about how many flies they can steal away from the rotten meat and get attracted to them. We already did their strength test 2 events ago, but to be fair, this is probably Patrick's best result yet. However, like I mentioned earlier, he isn't the only sticky plant in this tournament. The king sundews are the biggest sundews in the world, and as you saw right at the start of this video, do something that makes them extremely special. They wrap their leaves around their food as they struggle to get free. And as you'll see in a couple of minutes, I have finally managed to get some good footage of our king sundew doing just that after today's event. But before that happens, the king actually needs to catch something. Yet, as we have seen in the past few events, he isn't too good at holding on to the bugs that come his way. However, there are a few good reasons for this. After a few minutes, we can see the flies start to arrive at the rotten chicken, and it doesn't take too long for some of them to get caught. Now, while the king sundew is also very sticky like Patrick and has apparently caught things like birds before, the reason he can't really hold on to these flies is because he's actually perfectly adapted to catching giant moths. You see, he smells a bit sweet, kind of like wine, which gets stronger every evening, which is also when the moths come out of hiding to look for food. And so, not only will the moths mistake him for food and get caught, but they also have much bigger, powdery wings and aren't as strong as these green flies. This means they get caught much easier than the green flies, and once they are caught, they flap their wings so much more than the flies would because they just can't escape. And if you didn't know it, it, these tentacles can actually feel when a bug is moving on them, and the more they move, the more they know that they need to curl around whatever is there to eat it. And that's why after seeing him catch 30 flies, I knew that all we had to do was keep a couple of them on his leaves and he would start curling around them for the rest of the day. However, it's time we start looking at the top 3 plants in this tournament that will absolutely decimate these flies. Darling here is our cobra lily. She got that name because she kind of looks like a cobra, and this tongue here is where her nectar comes from. But although she does look very deadly, she has been quite tame in the tournament so far, and today is no exception. She manages to get 1 or 2 flies interested in tasting some of that nectar, but for some reason they aren't interested enough in her to actually go inside her trap and get caught. I don't think her nectar is as addictive as the flytrap or pitcher plant that we will see soon, but darling here is the only plant in today's event to not catch a single fly.
Time's up.
However, when it comes to the Venus flytraps, the competition starts to get exciting. DCXL and the other flytraps have done well enough in this tournament to put themselves into 2nd position on the leaderboard. And just to remind you, each plant can swap out with another plant of the same species because, as you'll find out, their traps can fill up very quickly, especially when the flies start swarming the plants. I have never seen this many flies in one place before, and what makes this even more insane is that I have never seen a fly trap catch 6 flies at once. Between the dark red mouths of the traps, their tasty nectar, and of course the rotten meat, it seems like the flies just can't keep away from these traps. But there's a very clear reason why. The stench of the meat attracts flies from all over the garden, something that the traps just can't really do themselves. However, as the flies start getting close to the chicken, instead of going to the meat, they end up seeing the dark red traps of the plant, which actually tricks them into thinking that the trap is their food. And so, as they land on these traps, they get a taste of their addictive and sweet nectar, and after just a couple licks of it, they are so hooked that they won't leave the plant anymore. This is a perfect example of how plants often trick animals to do what they want by looking and smelling like something else. Although this time, there literally is rotting meat around. DCXL was so quick, in fact, that as soon as I started seeing the swarm of flies, I ran off to get more fly traps to join in today's event. And even they started catching flies almost immediately after I put them in the greenhouse.
They're everywhere. I've never seen something like this before. This is insane.
However, we all know that there is one carnivorous plant that can deal with this many flies. Drosera and the pitcher plant. They have been wiping up the competition this far, and seeing as they are known for holding thousands of flies in their pitchers, there is no better event for her than this one. As we've seen so many times before, that addictive nectar gets hundreds of flies hooked on her, and those slippery walls and beautiful colors just mean she is an even more effective killer. Yet, as you guys saw earlier in the video, the wasps love this chicken, but they love the pitcher plants more. However, I used to wonder why the bugs can't just fly or walk back out, and you might be wondering too. But aside from the nectar literally being poisonous, which means they actually can't move anymore, and these tubes being too slippery for them to walk on, the shape of these traps are also very important. You see, not only do they guide all the bugs downwards towards their stomach acid, but if a fly flaps its wings inside of the pitcher, it actually causes a vacuum, which means that the fly only gets pulled further down the trap. Now Sarah is so effective at catching flies, I'm not going to even bother with counting how many bugs she just ate. She has completely filled herself all the way up to the top with them, so clearly she has won today's event. But that doesn't mean the rest of the competition hasn't become closer. Sarah has retained her spot at the top of the leaderboard, but with one more event left before the finale, every spot is still up for grabs, especially if Sarah comes in last place and the Flytraps win in the next event. If we pour 1,000 tiny flies onto our carnivorous plants, will they escape through the gaps in the Flytrap's teeth, or would there be so many packed inside there that the plants would have a feast? Well, today we're going to test that and 5 other deadly carnivorous plants by pouring thousands of tiny flies on them in the fly swarm. The 5th and final event in the Flytrap games, where we're searching for the deadliest carnivorous plant. Now, although I do have locusts, roaches, beetles, and hundreds of crickets, I don't have thousands of small flies. So after a trip to the pet store, I got as many as they had. 2 of them. It'll be enough, you'll see why later, but we are using small flies today because the competition needs to be fairer for all of our plants. 2 of them specialize in eating small bugs, not the big ones we have seen this far. Now, before we see how well they'll do when we literally pour thousands of flies on them, let's take a look at how well the Flytraps will do. I purposely got these smallest ones in the collection because these flies are so light that the trigger hairs on the big Flytraps can't even feel them. But as we know, Flytraps can only catch 1 or 2 flies per trap. And if they get overfed, they could stop closing their traps, and in some cases, even die. Anyway, there's no better way to find out what would actually happen to our Flytraps than feeding them their first of 3 waves of flies. I had no idea just how many flies would come out of this tub, and honestly, this fly trap is overwhelmed. While a couple traps are managing to catch some flies, most of them are doing one of 2 things. They either don't close at all, probably because there are too many bugs on these traps, or because the traps are too young or too old to catch something, or they do close but catch nothing at all, even though there are flies everywhere. However, there is a good reason for this. While I keep adding the 2nd and 3rd waves of flies onto our fly traps, you might notice why they do better sometimes and worse other times. In so many of our videos, we have seen how fly traps almost hunt for their food. And most of the time, it's a one-on-one battle. Just the fly trap and the bug. And what we've also noticed is how each fly trap almost has their own techniques or strategies that helps them catch their food. But like I said, they're usually one-on-one. Each time their sensitive trigger hairs gets touched is because there is just one bug that is completely interested in that trap and stays there for a reason. Yet, when there are thousands of flies running all over these traps, none of them are really interested in staying still. Sure, some of them get caught, but that's usually when there are less flies around and they're either unlucky or had some interest in staying in the fly trap. And with only 1 round done from the most interesting event in the series, I can't wait to see how Sarah, our currently ranked number 1 in the competition, might do. Because honestly, this is not what she is good at. As we've seen before, she is used to eating a lot of bugs at once. Her toxic nectar works perfectly on normal flies, and the vacuum we saw last episode works well at sucking them down her trap. But with flies this small, I don't think that vacuum will work very well. And after seeing how uninterested they were with the fly trap's nectar, I can only imagine what they might think about Sarah's nectar, even though it is much more addictive and potent. Oh wow, they love that. As you probably know, flies taste things with their feet. And seeing as this is Sarah's smallest sister, Not only is she covered in nectar, but that nectar is also bunched up together. So the flies get addicted pretty much as soon as they land on here. However, this is also a problem for her. You see, I'm pouring waves of flies every 2 minutes because this event is testing how well they can deal with the swarm of tiny flies that comes their way, not how many of them they can catch. And what that means for Sarah is that the flies kind of just eat her nectar, sit around, and then eventually fly off. Not many of them actually get caught because, similar to the fly traps, Sarah almost hunts for her food. The bugs have to choose to be there, not just randomly end up there. And that's why it'll be so damn interesting to see our sticky plants, Patrick and the king sundew, get a chance at catching these flies later on. However, let's not forget about Darling, our cobra lily. She honestly hasn't been doing too badly in this competition and is currently in 3rd spot. But seeing as she kind of catches bugs in a similar way to Sarah, I don't know how well she will do today. Her traps might help her catch these small flies because it is easier for something so small to get in there and then get confused by the windows, but at the same time, the flies won't taste her nectar that's on her tongue, unlike Sarah who has it on her lid. Going into Darling's catch, I know we need to be a bit more patient with her. She is probably the worst plant for an event like this because she focuses so heavily on getting bugs to walk inside her trap that there isn't much grip on her lid for bugs to hold onto, especially when they are as tiny as these flies. They literally just fall off as soon as they land on her. So I'm trying my best to put a couple of them on her tongue in hopes that she has a chance at catching some. However, no matter what I try, it seems like the closest we will get is just 1 or 2 of these flies walking past. The only other thing I can think of is putting the flies inside of her traps, but that defeats the whole point of this event. Darling just can't really deal with a swarm of little midges or fruit flies that might come her way. Yet, there are 2 plants that have perfectly adapted to dealing with them. Patrick the dewy pine and the king sundew. They have put up a decent fight so far in the series, but every time something huge like a locust, cricket or cockroach comes their way, the king sundew just can't hold on. I've mentioned it many times before, but these sticky tendrils are adapted to catching smaller bugs, more specifically moths. However, they will eat pretty much anything that gets overwhelmed by these sticky droplets. And seeing as these tiny flies are basically the same size as them, the king sundew is about to have a feast. As I pour the flies out over the king sundew, we can see how some of them fall directly onto those droplets and are caught immediately. As that slimy dew covers up their body, it pins their wings back and holds down their legs while slowly covering up their spiracles, which is how they breathe. So eventually, these flies will suffocate. However, some of them know how to escape. We can see how some of these guys have managed to get around the back of the king sundew by using the sticky dew to its advantage. You see, if you try and fight the glue, it is sticky, but if you work with it, it's slimy and slippery. And some of these flies have realized this and drag their wings and bodies around the traps and then crawl around the back where they then climb free. And while some of these flies did get caught, most of them have managed to escape. And the only way to stop that from happening is with something even stickier. You guys have heard me say it so many times, but never really shown you proof of it. But Patrick, the dewy pine, genuinely is one of the stickiest carnivorous plants. He is stickier than the king sundews, stickier than butterworts, which you haven't seen yet, and almost as sticky as royale, a plant that works with assassin bugs to eat their food. And aside from being sticky, Patrick here has a major advantage over the king sundew that will help him catch way more bugs and stop them from escaping. He has sticky droplets on all sides of his leaves, not just the front. So as I start adding his flies, I already know he will dominate today's event. You can see that these flies are pretty much locked onto this plant in the exact position they land in. In fact, I can only see one of them that is strong enough to drag its body around. No matter where you look or how you place the camera, all you can see is a wriggling swarm of flies stuck on these glistening dewdrops. Yet, the craziest part of Patrick's catch today is that every single one of those flies were stuck to him the very next day when I took him outside. And for one of the first times ever, saying my plant looks dirty is a compliment. However, now that we know that Patrick can absolutely decimate a swarm of midges or fruit flies, we also know that the leaderboard is going to change quite a bit. And guys, I have an even better prize for our winner than last time. After seeing how well Patrick did today, he hasn't managed to move up the leaderboard, but finally did get full points in one of the events. And although the Flytraps beat Sarah today, the pitcher plant still had enough points from the past to take the win. And after discovering the deadliest carnivorous plant, let's see how well she does with one of the deadliest animals around as part of her reward. The giant house spider is famous for being one of the fastest spiders in the world. They used to hold a Guinness World Record for their speed, as they can run at over half a meter per second.
Damn it!
But can all that speed help him escape from the world's deadliest carnivorous plant? Will those powerful legs help him run away, or will our pitcher plant hold him back? Well, to make this as fair as possible, let's give this guy a meal so he has enough energy to escape, and this also gives us a chance to see how quick he actually is. Now it might not seem like it, but it only took this guy 0.1 seconds to catch this fly. That's as quick as you can snap your fingers. It was so quick in fact that I didn't even know he had caught something until a few seconds later.
Look, he got one. That was quick.
Yet what makes this better for you guys is that we have 2 spiders to feed our plant, and this guy is big enough to get a cricket. Now, seeing as this guy is double the size of the other spider, he should be more powerful and stronger than him. So my guess is that he will escape much easier than the small one. However, this smaller guy is lighter, so maybe he will be able to escape easier. The only way to find out is to feed our plant. Now, even though Sarah and the pitcher plants here have earned the title of the world's deadliest carnivorous plant, spiders have a very unique relationship with them. But this guy is making it really difficult to show that to you right now.
Why do you love this tub so much? There you go.
If you didn't know, we just finished a competition between all of our plants, and getting the chance to have some juicy spiders is the prize for our winner, along with some other cool things I'll show you later. But for now, we have our small spider doing some risky stuff around the opening of Sarah's mouth.
Oh.
Honestly, this catch surprised me quite a bit. This small spider is so much lighter than the big one that I really thought he would be able to hold on and keep himself out of trouble while walking past. But as it turns out, the pitcher plant's waxy walls that are perfectly adapted to making bugs slip in also stopped this guy from holding on, even though we all know how good spiders are at climbing things. Now, I did try to get him out of here because I thought I pushed him in, and that's not very fair, but after seeing the footage, he actually slipped in. Regardless, he was deep inside the stomach acids already, and there wasn't much I could do to get him out. However, we still have the big spider to feed this plant, and a couple other things I haven't told you about, which will show us just how special the relationship between these plants and spiders can be. Yet, for now, let's try and see how the big spider does with the pitcher plant. And seeing as I still thought I knocked the smaller one in, I spent a long time waiting to see if this guy would climb towards the front of the trap and possibly work with the plant instead of getting caught.
See if we can get him a bit closer. Okay,
And once again, the giant house spider just can't get a grip on the pitcher plant and falls in as if it doesn't have 8 legs and grippy feet. Just like before, I tried to get this guy out too because I felt like it was my fault, but as we saw, it wasn't. There's a pretty good reason why these guys get caught so easily, and the other spiders we'll see in this video actually work with the plant. The giant house spider doesn't really use its web while moving around. In fact, it would be silly to have a safety web dragging behind them because these guys always sprint around. Now, not only does this mean they can fall much easier because they aren't very careful, but their feet are adapted to flat surfaces and flat webs. Not really these super slippery plants that curve to catch bugs. However, there are some spiders that use this to their advantage. The garden spider is perfectly adapted to climbing any plant that comes its way, and seeing as a pitcher plant is just a modified leaf, it should be able to climb all over it without struggling. And for some spiders, even use the plant to help it catch food. Yet, before I explain more about that, there are some spiders that can escape getting caught, but still get caught, if you know what I mean. This is the false widow. It is almost as good at climbing leaves as the garden spider is, but unlike the garden spider, he has had a bit of nectar. We've seen it many times before, but the false widow eats carnivorous plant nectar quite often, unlike the garden spider here, which doesn't really seem to like it too much. And as we already know, the nectar is poisonous, so this guy is starting to feel the effects of it. Usually, the fly, or spider in this case, would be under the lid eating the nectar, where it then starts to get a bit drunk and eventually falls into the trap, regardless of how good it is at climbing. Now, of course, the false widow didn't fall inside the trap because he was in the wrong spot, but this gives us an opportunity to see how well the garden spider actually works with the pitcher plant to catch its food. And to be honest, the garden spider isn't even the best at doing this. The garden spider loves using its webs everywhere it goes, so if he wants to come down and see what the pitcher plant got drunk but never caught, he easily can. Obviously, after discovering that this guy is another spider, one more dangerous than him, the garden spider runs away to watch what it might do. But after a few minutes of it doing nothing, he returns to his new hideout. And of course, the pitcher plant has got itself another victim. Yet, I did mention there are other spiders out there that are better at living with the pitcher plant. The linked spider. Just like the garden spider, it is excellent at climbing leaves and plants and often hides under the lid of pitcher plants, waiting for bugs to come past and taste that nectar before it strikes. Yet, just like the house spider we saw earlier, it doesn't use any webs. That's because it has adapted to climbing plants, unlike the house spider that has adapted to flat areas and flat webs. So luckily for the link spider, they don't really need as much web as the garden spider does to stay safe. However, that doesn't mean the garden spider doesn't have its own unique way of staying safe around these plants. As far as I have seen, these guys are very active at dawn and dusk, probably because the darkness keeps them protected from other predators seeing them. So by making it dark in here, he feels safe enough to come out of his hiding spot. And what I find fascinating is that this guy seems like he's looking for that false widow he saw earlier and wants to make sure it isn't on his new home. After going down to see where it last was, he retreats back under the lid to hang out for the rest of the night. Yet, before we turn the cameras off, there's one more thing that the garden spider does to keep himself safe. Remember those safety webs I mentioned earlier? Well, the garden spider is always attached to one. He climbs out without any struggle. no matter how hard you might shake him in. And while the pitcher plant has now had a huge meal, it has also gained a new teammate. Throughout the night and the entire next day, the spider stayed on his new home, and even now, a few days later, he is still here, catching whatever comes past. Now, I did mention that there are some other cool prizes for our plants, and for you guys too. The first prize is the custom-made pots that I have spent about a year designing and refining. The plant tag not only has more information on it than a normal tag, but it can also pop in and out of the pot so that it doesn't get in the way or fade in the sun and eventually break apart. And obviously, the pots are designed to give the plant heaps of airflow, water flow, and enough space for their long roots to grow down without wasting all the sideways space that we usually get from the bigger pots. But right now, I'm testing if she can actually break this pot like pitcher plants usually do, because she's growing so damn quick in it. Of course, she has also been given her Season 2 trophy like I promised, and the prize for you guys is that 5 subscribers will be getting a division of our pitcher plants that were in this competition. So make sure to be subscribed and even share this video with someone else who might enjoy it, because you could get an email from me asking you for your mailing address. Until then, I'll see you in the next one.